What would you do if you were taking care of Britney Spears? What would be the first thing you'd do today to get her help?
Medication. Put it in her. If she doesn't want to take it, I would.
Remember every time you'd watch Dr. Phil, there was always somebody that Dr. Phil had to add to the conversation in like every other case.
I'd like to add to the conversation Dr. Charles Sophy. He is a psychiatrist and medical director for the County of Los Angeles Department of Child and Family.
The Free Britney movement, where people were really trying to figure out this conservatorship. His tone was a bit different about freeing Britney.
What's appropriate at this point, do you think?
For her to have her freedom, maybe for her to have a little bit of an eyeball on her for treatment where she shows up for the next 6 months. And if she's compliant, maybe she doesn't even need medicine, but if she shows up, steps up, and she shows that she's able to handle her life, let her alone. Let her live her life.
Makes you wonder what changed that would make him say that he would force medication on Britney. But did you also know that Dr. Charles Sophy has a connection with Elliot Rodger, one that everybody refers to as an incel?
23rd, 2014, in Isla Vista, California, 22-year-old Elliot Rodger killed 6 people and injured 14 near the campus of the University of California.
This is out of page 125, and this is what he wrote in his manifesto. My parents arranged for us to have a conference with my psychiatrist, Dr. Charles Sophy. I set out with my mother to meet father outside Dr. Sophy's house in Beverly Hills. And when we got there, we were surprised to see that Sumaya had come for the conference too. This presented a conflict because Sumaya and my mother had recently had an argument due to Sumaya refusing to let me stay at father's house during my mother's trip to Hawaii. For more than half of the conversation, the doctor spent time resolving this petty conflict instead of addressing the troubles that I was going through. I finally did get my situation. Dr. Sophy ended up giving me the same useless advice that every psychiatrist, psychologist, and counselor had given me in the past. I don't know why my parents wasted money on therapy, as it will never help me in struggling against such a cruel and unjust world. The doctor ended up dismissing it by prescribing me a controversial medication, risperidone. After researching this medication, I found that it was the absolute wrong thing for me to take. I refused to take it, and I never saw Dr. Sophy again after that. Dr. Sophy, for those that don't know, he is a Beverly Hills board-certified psychiatrist and basically a shrink to the stars with over 35 years of experience, okay? Dr. Sophy is board certified in 3 clinical specialties, and this is based on what he's saying on his website: adult psychiatry, child and adolescent psychiatry, and family practice. Now, in a deposition, Dr. Sophy shares a little bit more about his background, whether he's an MD or a DO, which I just learned were 2 different things, apparently. For this deposition and for this upload, I'm going to credit attorney Sean McMillan, who represented Rafaelina Duval in this case against the Los Angeles Department of Social Services. You can find the full deposition and Dr. Charles Sophy's interview on his channel. It will all be linked in the description box.
You say medical school, what are you talking about?
4 years of education from 1982 to 1986. Postgraduate.
Postgraduate, okay. And what degree did you obtain?
A doctor of osteopathy.
That's a DO?
Yes.
Okay. What is osteopathy? And it could be, I have this big misconception, maybe the public has this big misconception, that it's like massages and acupuncture and stuff like that. It's hocus pocus.
It's like a regular medical doctor and a chiropractor combined.
Okay.
To be able to do manipulations and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so
now, I know you guys are watching this little deposition, and we're going to get into about that deposition. The interviewing of this deposition is very telling about, it sounds like you could be an MD, you could be a DO, and also do psychiatry or something in behavioral health. And, you have your MDs. But DOs are more like a holistic approach to mental health, general health. Correct me if I'm wrong.
prescribe medications, just like an MD, right? Yes?
Yes.
But what you do before you'll start pushing pills on people is you look at the person as a whole, including potentially lifestyle issues, spinal issues, pain issues, things like that.
100%.
100%.
Yes.
So you're treating the person as a whole as opposed to just giving them a pill to resolve a symptom.
Correct.
Okay. Well, as a doctor of osteopathy, I think you explained to me already that you can write prescriptions.
Yes.
Can you write prescriptions for all the same medications that an MD could write prescriptions for?
Yes.
Can you perform surgeries?
If you so choose, or you're trained and
Okay.
yes.
And if you had the appropriate training, you could perform any surgery that a medical, an MD, could perform.
Correct.
Okay. Reason you can think of why a doctor of osteopathy would be referenced sort of in a pejorative sense.
I would just guess people's perceptions or misperceptions.
Pejorative is an interesting word. Let me tell you guys something. Back in 2011, the Los Angeles Times did an investigation on Dr. Charles Sophy and his dual roles between being this kind of like reality Hollywood correspondent. I mean, he was in like Dr. Phil and other shows for a good while. He was on the show Sober House from 2009 to 2010, as well as Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew from 2008 to 2011. So the Los Angeles Times took a little interest in his dual role, especially because they noted while he was in the role of medical director and in charge of this executive team at the Department of Children and Family Services, there was repeated criticism for systemic breakdowns that contributed to the fatalities of children under their supervision. Charles Sophy's unit specifically had been at fault for some of those deaths.
This article was written in 2011 while they already had fatalities. You know who else died while he was the medical director of the Los Angeles Child and Family Services? Gabriel Hernandez.
Family Services had significant involvement in this case.
Board of Supervisors have now taken notice. There's something about this kid's death.
There was no medical follow-up, even to the injuries that were acknowledged by the department.
You're thinking about in your head, how could this be true?
As prosecutors, we need to up our game.
She didn't just prosecute the mother and her boyfriend, she also took the step of prosecuting the 4 social workers.
They had a job, and their job was to save a little boy.
The system is overtaxed. The most children I had was about 280.
So while he was doing the medical director thing with Los Angeles and government, he was also in these other roles of Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew, making his appearances and, doing his private practice thing, which then should bring us back to this deposition from 2015. Rafaelina Duval and baby Ryan case was a case out of the Los Angeles Department of Family and Children's Services. This is why that deposition exists and why there was a lawsuit against the department. And what role he played in that, we will talk. Rafaelina Duval is the mother of baby Ryan. Baby Ryan, when he was born, had feeding difficulties. During the time that he was born, there was also a custody battle happening between the mother and the father of baby Ryan. Rafaelina was doing what she had to do to make sure that she was attending to her medical appointment, whereas Ryan's father felt like he wasn't going to address those medical issues. He then targeted Rafaelina by lying to a nutritionist about baby Ryan not being fed, which then led to a referral to CPS, where Children's Services got involved. Now, what happened after that was a series of really crazy events where baby Ryan was taken out of Rafaelina's custody at only 15 months old. There was no warrant. There was no judge's hold. They didn't investigate the pediatrician's statement or referral to a nutritionist or any reports or follow-up. There was perjury with these court reports that the social workers wrote and that Dr. Charles Sophy signed. They labeled Rafaelina Duval as having Munchausen by proxy and intentionally causing her child to get sick. Let's get into this deposition.
So the total limit of your direct experience where you directly treated a patient who was suspected of being the victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy was 6 weeks back in the 92-94 time frame?
Approximately.
Okay. Any other cases besides that one where you actually directly were involved in the treatment of the patient or victim?
Not directly.
What about rendering an opinion regarding the rule-out diagnosis of Munchausen syndrome by proxy without reviewing in some way the medical records?
Well, let me be clear. When I say rendering opinion, I mean when someone says, if you have a parent who's doing this or you have a case like that, what do you think? And just me talking about what I think or what I would offer as the next steps or what I would look into further, or did you check that out, and that kind of stuff is what I mean by an opinion, not a definite yes, they have it or they don't.
Some of you guys may not be familiar with Munchausen by proxy. People have talked recently about Munchausen by proxy or factitious disorder because of the Gypsy Rose case. But I want you guys to keep in mind that Gypsy Rose, Dee Dee Blanchard, was never formally diagnosed with Munchausen by proxy. I believe the defense came up with that defense for Gypsy Rose at that time. However, Dee Dee Blanchard was never formally diagnosed. It sounded like she might have met a criteria based on what they were seeing, but there was never any actual one-to-one meeting of Dee Dee Blanchard. She was killed. It exists, yes, and it's a very rare psychological disorder that essentially is marked by attention-seeking behavior by a caregiver through the people that they care for. And of course, there's other symptoms that follow and other behaviors that follow with the Munchausen by proxy, but I just wanted to throw that out there, or factitious disorder, because the name was changed in the DSM.
You told me that you were involved in one case where you were directly treating the victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, right?
Family.
Yes.
Yes.
That was 92, 94.
Approximately, yes.
Okay. Then you told me that you were connected in some way to 10 other cases wherein you assisted in some way in the rule-out diagnosis, correct?
Yeah, approximately 10, yes, correct.
Okay. There's no others where somebody came to you and said, what should I do here? Is this possibly Munchausen's? Just those 10.
Isn't Dr. Charles Sophie's experience with Munchausen by proxy or factitious disorder very spotty as far as experience-wise? I mean, listen to what he's saying here in this deposition in 2015.
No, in my lifetime, there's been many times it's been brought up, but maybe not put on the rule-out diagnostic list.
Just those medical conditions, the diagnosis alone will raise a red flag that maybe MSP should be considered. Did I misunderstand you?
You did not.
Okay. Give me the list of those.
Well, I don't have a full, complete list. I'll give you things that I can think of.
Yes.
Like I said, failure to thrive. In general, malnutrition. Bone diseases. Skin diseases. Academic dysfunction.
Where did you obtain the information that you relied upon in rendering your opinions that are set out in your declaration?
As we said in number 2, I used the declarations of the 2 workers.
And you just believed everything they told you? You didn't verify what they were saying?
Well, I knew that they were telling the truth.
How did you know?
Because there was reasonable doubt there that what they were experiencing and seeing and what the detention information showed, that what their decision was made to the best of their knowledge.
So the 2 workers that Dr. Charles Sophie is referencing are not licensed. They don't have any clinical experience. They just happen to be caseworkers. They call them social workers, but believe it or not, just because they're a social worker doesn't mean that they have the credentials or the graduate or the undergraduate work for that. Anybody in a county level can be a caseworker. Your teacher can be a caseworker. So if he ran with their recommendation on a court report about what looked to be like Munchausen by proxy, and he signed it, and he's the doctor, and he didn't even look at documentation to figure out if that is a true diagnosis, because that just tells you that these doctors are willing to sign just about anything on a court report and have your children be taken away.
Did you do anything to verify, prior to rendering your opinion in your declaration, did you do anything to verify that what they were saying in their declarations was in fact true?
I looked at their attachments.
You often exaggerate to make a point?
Depends.
Sometimes you do.
I think everyone does.
If you need to.
I think everyone does.
A lot of what happened with the Dr. Phil show was exaggerated. We have to admit to that. It was exaggerated for TV.
Do you see anywhere in the reports that the social workers signed under penalty of perjury and filed with the court any mention at all of any medical care provider, a license holder, suggesting that Ms. Duval suffered from, even suggesting, and I don't mean diagnosing here, I mean just suggesting, that Ms. Duval suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy?
Yes.
Okay, where?
That paragraph we just went over with Gil.
Well, does Gil diagnose mom as MSP?
No, you said suggesting, and that did, maybe there's a flag on it.
Okay, but Dr. Gil herself did not suggest that Ms. Duval suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, did she?
No.
Okay.
Now, in 2016, the Los Angeles jury awarded Rafaelina Duval 3.1 million for the unwarranted seizure of her baby by the government social workers. So this man, through his mistake, cost the citizens of the Los Angeles County 3.1 million. And it was through attorney Sean McMillan's advocacy and pushing, really the questioning and not giving up on this case because of the injustice that happened that really made a difference for Rafaelina Duval, her family, and made right by their way. However, she had her 15-month-old removed for so many years. I mean, how do you make up for time? Money doesn't give you time, right? So if you look currently on the website, the Los Angeles County website for Family and Child Services, you don't see Dr. Charles Sophie on the website anymore. I'm not really sure when he left the department. And typically somebody in such a high level in that position, there's typically an announcement or something is put out there to let the citizens know that there's going to be a change in leadership or something has happened. I do kind of wonder if he voluntarily left that position or if he was removed or given another opportunity to retire. Let me tell you, I worked in government for 10 years. I know what retire looks like. Then they suddenly disappear and you're like, what the hell happened? That kind of retirement. I don't know. I'm kind of curious. Elliot Rodgers, who was the son of a Hollywood filmmaker who grew in a very privileged life, wrote a manifesto of 141 pages with a series of YouTube videos. He went on a killing spree, killing 7 people, including himself, and injuring so many others. But did you know that in Elliot Rodgers' manifesto, he mentions Dr. Sophie in pages 112, 119, 125. It should be noted that in this manifesto, you definitely see Elliot Rodgers just dwindling and really struggling with his family relationships, peer relationships, with his outlook in life, something that if he was seeing somebody that was treating him would have been able to pick this up right away. But let's read page 125. My parents arranged for us to have a conference with my psychiatrist, Dr. Charles Sophie. I set out with my mother to meet father outside Dr. Sophie's house in Beverly Hills. And when we got there, we were surprised to see that Sumaya had come for the conference too. This presented a conflict because Sumaya and my mother had recently had an argument due to Sumaya refusing to let me stay at father's house during my mother's trip to Hawaii. For more than half of the conversation, the doctor spent time resolving this petty conflict instead of addressing the troubles that I was going through. When we finally did get to my situation, Dr. Sophie ended up giving me the same useless advice that every psychiatrist, psychologist, and counselor had given me in the past. I don't know why my parents wasted money on therapy, as it will never help me in struggling against such a cruel and unjust world. The doctor ended up dismissing it by prescribing me a controversial medication, risperidone. After researching this medication, I found that it was the absolute wrong thing for me to take. I refused to take it, and I never saw Dr. Sophie again after that. His manifesto is very troubling, but you could see this young man dwindling. And based on this interaction, it sounded like Elliot was really just frustrated with his outlook in life, with the dynamics and the relationships that he was having with his family. He was seeking support. And what he got from Dr. Charles Sophie was a prescription for risperidone. Conveniently, Dr. Charles Sophie doesn't talk about Elliot Rodgers, doesn't mention him whatsoever. But Dr. Phil did mention it on one of his shows, on one of his gun violence shows.
22-year-old Elliot Rodgers killed 6 people and injured 14 near the campus of the University of California, Santa Barbara, before killing himself inside his vehicle. Take a look.
If I remember correctly, doesn't Dr. Charles Sophie sit on the Dr. Phil board to consult various cases that they have that go on the show?
And I'm also proud to say he is a member of the Dr. Phil Advisory Board, which is made up of experts from all over the country.
So the man that treated Elliot Rodgers at one point and was even mentioned in his manifesto, Dr. Phil talked about Elliot Rodgers. Did Dr. Phil know that Dr. Charles Sophie was at one point treating Elliot Rodgers? You let me know what you guys think in the comments about that. You know, nobody's perfect. Let me just say this. There's always somebody who's got a little something in their background. You know As a social worker, my family's not perfect, right? None of us are perfect. But I think that it's when we come with our imperfections and we're able to own those imperfections that really make us who we are, right? Unique. Back in 2023, December, there was this article that was put out there and some people ignored it. I certainly did. I didn't even know that this was an issue. Celebrity psychiatrist Dr. Charles Sophie claims his own son planned to murder him. Says Dr. Charles Sophie, the psychiatrist to the stars, has filed a restraining order against his own son, Benjamin Sophy-Voss. According to legal documents obtained by the Blast, the celebrity psychiatrist claimed his son subjected him to multiple acts of abuse, and he is afraid he can be killed in his sleep by his 22-year-old who has mental health issues. Shockingly, he says his own son was planning to kill him after being found with murder tools. Now, I don't have a peek or a sneak into Britney Spears' financial situation, so I can't say for a fact that this woman's going broke. What looks broke to me might not look broke to you. You know, some of us live by the dollar that's on our bank account. Like that is the working poor. That's how we are, right? So I find it so interesting that this doctor is going to say what he's going to say about Britney Spears' conservatorship, that she's in the brink of going broke. What does that mean? Just like, what does it mean that there was murder tools? This is the same psychiatrist who wrote 2 books on his website, Family Values, Reset Trust, Boundaries, and Connections with Your Child. Side by Side, a revolutionary program to help mothers and daughters learn to navigate and resolve even the most volatile conflicts, taking their relationship to a new level of understanding. Nobody's perfect. We all have something going on. The problem is that we have to be very careful when we throw out conservatorships and a bunch of medications, because for me, that is also a red flag as somebody who's not being professional, but using a bit of their privilege to try to hurt people in the community, right? Or to try to hurt those that are vulnerable in their mental health state. So Dr. Sophie filed a restraining order, okay, on his son. It looks like his son was diagnosed with mental health issues as a child. He was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder as well as bipolar disorder. The former medical director for the County of Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services claimed he wasn't waiving attorney-client privilege by sharing details of the abuse he endured at the hands of his son. Dr. Sophie, in his restraining order petition, claimed Benjamin emotionally and physically abused him multiple times. Following multiple acts of abuse by my son, I have had to take measures to protect myself out of fear that he will kill me, the 63-year-old wrote. Even though we live in my house together, I lock my bedroom when I go to sleep at night out of fear he would come in while I sleep and kill me. Dr. Sophie recalled a recent domestic violence incident that occurred on December 15th. I was at home with him and the housekeeper in the afternoon at around 3:15 p.m. I went to the back porch where he was located. He was at a table doing something with an airsoft rifle. He continued, when I approached him, I could see that he had tools out, presumably to work on the rifle. I could see that he was in a compromised state. His eyes were not normal. His physical appearance was disheveled. And from prior experience, I knew he was not in a stable frame of mind. Dr. Sophie revealed that he was immediately concerned for his safety because Benjamin previously inflicted violence upon him. I started to speak with him to calm him down and ascertain his mental state. I was standing close to him when he suddenly bolted up from his seat, startling me. He recalled in the court documents. He added he immediately grabbed the rifle and pointed it in my face. He began screaming at me that he was going to kill me, saying such things as, "That's it, you're going to die, and I am going to ill you right now." The famous doctor claims he immediately ran away while calling to the housekeeper to call 911. He and the housekeeper went into the laundry room to hide and could hear him walking through the stairs, continuing to threaten. Unfortunately, the laundry room does not have a lock on the door. Dr. Sophie disclosed he began banging on the door to the room and forced his way inside. He was screaming his death threats with such ferocity that his face turned purple and he appeared to be frothing at the mouth. The celebrity psychiatrist further revealed, I began to struggle with him to save my life. He had been pointing the rifle at my face. I was trying to grab him, the rifle, anything I could. In the struggle, I fell to the ground. He began bludgeoning me with the rifle, striking me on the back of my ear and my leg. I was striking back at him with my cell phone, trying to get him off. I was trying to stand up and began begging him not to kill me and to stop the attack. His response, I'm going to kill you. You are an a-hole. He put the rifle in my face, so I covered my face and tried to move away from him. He fired, striking in my leg. I was in immediate extreme pain and could feel that I was bleeding. It caused a deep wound in my leg, profuse bleeding, and severe bruising. Dr. Sophie told the court that the shooting caused him horrific distress and he contemplated jumping out of the second floor window of the laundry room to save my life. However, law enforcement interfered before things could become worse. In another incident, Dr. Sophie alleged his son rushed at me, grabbed me, and shoved me into the refrigerator and held the knife to my throat. He claimed the 22-year-old held the blade lengthwise along his throat and intermittently stabbed him in the leg and arms while yelling, "You're going to effing die tonight. And I'm sick of your." Dr. Sophie wants the judge to grant him a no contact order and make his son stay at least 100 yards away. The famous medical professional also asked the court to order Benjamin to leave his Beverly Hills property. I am in sustained fear that respondent will come home and ill me as well as whoever may be home with me. He lamented in the petition. Shockingly, in the documents, Dr. Sophie claims after his son was arrested, he found evidence of a plan to ill him. Alarmingly, after his arrest, I looked inside my son's car. I found a full container of gasoline, a circular saw akin to the ones used to cut through thick branches, i.e., bone, he wrote, adding this appears to be his preparation to ill me, corroborated by the previous incident where he brought home a box with items to tie me up, silence me, and stab me. Dr. Charles Sophie is a prominent psychiatrist whose work with several A-listers in Hollywood, including Michael Jackson, Paris Hilton, and more. The case is now up to the judge. Now, I haven't seen any more details as far as what happened and whether the judge granted anything. Maybe that's something that could be looked at. However, I also don't see a whole lot of social media presence of Benjamin or him speaking out. I am kind of curious to know what his side of the story is, given that, he's an adult. Is there something more going on to this that we don't know? How it's being reported is that a lot of this is unprovoked. It does kind of make me wonder what led Benjamin to where he's at, acting like, was it a huge outbreak? What were his triggers at that time? You let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you guys think about this situation? And what do you guys think about Dr. Charles Sophie connection to Elliot Rodger and the fact that he was insufficient in his treatment as well, as Elliot Rodger wrote in his manifesto? What do you think about his handling of the Rafaelina Duval case back in Los Angeles, which really cost them close to 6 million actually when you think about the amount total? That's what was reported. Now it sounds like at some point Dr. Sophie and TMZ were very much against this conservatorship, but something changed in the last couple of years, right? To now suddenly recommend this woman to be in any kind of treatment if that was his patient, which, I mean, she's not. But also keep in mind something that happened a couple years ago when Dr. Charles Sophie was against this conservatorship. He said that he was contacted by somebody in Britney Spears' team.
Field, that there was some connection where somebody asked you to come on board. Could you explain that?
Yeah, earlier on in this whole process, about 8-10 months ago, I was asked to come in and evaluate her medications, but I just wasn't comfortable at that point because there was so much controversy about this whole who's in charge and who's going to take ownership, and it was just too convoluted at that point. But I'm willing to do it whatever it comes down.
Who asked you to get involved?
I think a management person within her regime.
So they wanted you to evaluate her medications?
See if appropriately medicated, because I think at some point there was some talk about her being over medicated and not able to speak on her own behalf.
I find that to be interesting. I also find it to be interesting, this whole little narrative that TMZ is pushing against Britney Spears. But you guys let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you guys on the next one. Rabbits out. Bye, guys.